Okay, so we'll get started, and as people come in, Chris will let him in. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. My name's Dave Steele. I'm the Executive Director of Mobilize. We're a nonprofit organization based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we are extremely excited today to welcome all of you to a pre-proposal conference for our RFP for FlexRide Milwaukee. So just very briefly, to give you an overview of what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to introduce ourselves, myself and our project team here, give you a background on our project, a background on FlexRide Milwaukee and how it currently exists as a pilot, and look forward to discussing the goals and objectives for FlexRide 2.0, as we're calling it here. That is the expanded FlexRide service that we're going to be launching, that Mobilize is leading the launch of in partnership with some of our local partners here, including Southeast Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, or SewerPAC, to expand the service in 2023 under a ARPA grant that we received from the state of Wisconsin. We'll go into some of the RFP details, and we're looking to save some time, significant time at the end for questions and answers from attendees. So with that, I'll reintroduce myself here, Dave Steele with Mobilize, just a little bit of a background on our organization. We are a transit advocacy group that dates back to 1991 in our region. And in the middle part of this last decade here, 2014, 2015, we pulled together a leadership council called the Regional Transit Leadership Council, made up of elected business and civic leaders from throughout southeastern Wisconsin. And this leadership council really gelled into a number of important regional initiatives across southeastern Wisconsin. Our state does not have regional transit authorities. So that means, of course, our region does not have regional transit authorities. So our leadership council really serves as that kind of backbone convener to bring groups together to discuss what we can do to bridge some of the transportation divides in our region. We changed our name to Mobilize in 2021. The SE is significant there in capital letters because that stands for Southeastern Wisconsin. So I've been happy to work over the last several years here with Eric Lind from SewerPAC. So I'll toss it over to Eric to introduce himself. And also we are engaging with Chris Bongiorno from Bongiorno Consulting to help us manage this RFP process. So I'll toss it over to Eric and Chris for brief intros.
Great, thanks, Dave. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. My name is Eric Lind. I'm a chief planner with the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. We're a regional planning agency and also the Metropolitan Planning Organization designated by the federal government for the 7-county Southeastern Wisconsin region. We've been one of the lead partners on the FlexRide Milwaukee pilot program, which is coming to a close in a couple weeks. And we are continuing to support Mobilize as we look forward to FlexRide 2.0, which is obviously the focus of this RFP. So I'll turn it over to Chris to introduce himself.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Eric. I'm Chris Bongiorno with Bongiorno Consulting. I'm supporting the team on this effort, and I'll be tracking your questions in the chat throughout the meeting. So please feel free to post questions in the chat and we'll address them at the end. Thanks.
Okay, so, Mobilize and by extension, FlexRide Milwaukee really is a product of partnerships. And, many of the fiscal and political constraints we have here in our state require creativity. And thankfully, we have some very creative partners that have gone after and seized different opportunities. FlexRide Milwaukee, as it currently exists, is a pilot that was launched in March of 2022, funded by a grant through the National Science Foundation. And the lead applicant of that grant is our academic partner, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee School of Architecture and Urban Planning. And the main civic partner in that grant is SewerPAC, the Southeast Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission. Mobilize has played a supporting role as a partner in the FlexRide pilot, along with, really a constellation of partners. And I won't go into, great detail for a lot of these names, but It includes workforce development groups, including Employ Milwaukee, the main workforce development entity in Milwaukee County, workforce development boards from the suburbs, business groups in the suburbs, some municipal governments, including the city of Franklin, one of the south suburbs of Milwaukee, and very significantly, Milwaukee County. Milwaukee County controls our transit system. They were the first county in the United States to declare racism as a public health crisis. This was back in 2018, long before the pandemic. Their core county service, one of their core county services is transit and transportation, and have been very supportive of our FlexRide pilot through coordinating with the transit system and encouraging riders to use FlexRide, which has been a tremendous partnership for us. So the challenge that FlexRide 1.0 and FlexRide 2.0 will seek to address, that FlexRide 1.0 does address and 2.0 will address, is really gaps in our transit service area. And then we're not unique in this in southeastern Wisconsin, of course, but it is exacerbated by our lack of a regional transit authority and our lack of overall political and fiscal coordination in our region, especially as it relates to transit. So the big yellow area here is where the transit service is actually quite good. And Milwaukee County Transit System serves a footprint of about 1 million people in Milwaukee County. It's a densely populated county. The city of Milwaukee, densely populated city, but as in many metro regions across the United States, over the last 70 years, we've seen a significant suburban sprawl into our neighboring counties where the transit service does not reach. There have been a number of fits and starts over the years to serve our suburban areas with transit, but unfortunately, many of them have fallen apart due to lack of political will and, critically and often overlooked, lack of ridership. As we know, the last mile gap is a huge challenge in serving suburban areas. And many of these suburban bus routes have, failed because, the distances that people have to walk and the time spent on the bus really discourages ridership. Racial equity, and I mentioned Milwaukee County's focus on racial equity and, really their focus on transit, addressing racial poverty or racial equity in our region. We have here a map, and often unbeknownst to a lot of people outside our region, the city of Milwaukee is a majority city. Milwaukee County is increasingly a majority county. And, you don't see those types of demographics in our suburban counties. We have persistent poverty and segregation where one of the, unfortunately near the top of nearly every list as it relates to concentrated poverty and income inequality and racial inequalities in our area. So, many of these conversations that led to FlexRide at the civic, business, and elected level really focused on how we address concerns of racial equity and reduce barriers that are preventing people from accessing every opportunity at their disposal. And we know that there's many barriers, but one of the chief ones and the ones that we are looking to impact is the transportation barrier. So we see here the concentration of job-seeking folks in many of the dense core neighborhoods and cities in our region, but the majority of jobs are in the suburban areas that are difficult to reach with our existing transit system. So I'm going to toss it over to Eric to talk more in depth about what FlexRide looks like right now.
Thank you, Dave. Yes, I will. I'm going to breeze through several slides here that talk about the FlexRide Milwaukee pilot that SewerPAC has been one of the lead agencies on. Just to give you a background on what we're doing now so that we can apply the lessons that we've learned through this pilot to the next iteration of FlexRide. So this is an on-demand transportation pilot, on-demand only. There are no advanced reservation features as part of the service. So it is booking service as you need it. That pilot does end October 31st and was funded initially by a $1 million grant from the National Science Foundation. Prior to that grant, we actually received a $50,000 planning grant from the National Science Foundation that led to the implementation of this pilot. That funding was for, and that planning stage was done in 2021. As Dave has mentioned, UWM and SewerPAC have been the lead partners, but there have been numerous other partners that have worked on this pilot, including most of the ones that Dave has already mentioned. And then obviously Mobilize being a key partner in this and really the leader moving forward has been critical in the absence of a regional transportation authority that could take this on. The pilot, the purpose of the pilot, as Dave sort of described on the previous slides, is to connect workers from Milwaukee to jobs in the northwest suburbs. In particular, we know that there are a lot of people that don't have access to a car, and I've got a slide later on that shows the applicant to the pilot, and close to 90% of them do not have access to a car. So it's really serving those folks that don't have access to these jobs within a reasonable walk from a bus route, trying to get them access and the opportunity to apply for these jobs. And the RFP that we are covering today is obviously a way to continue and expand this goal. The pilot did have eligibility restrictions on it. City of Milwaukee residents 18 and older, and then obviously the employment zone in Menomonee Falls and Butler was a restriction as well, because they had to either work or want to work in the employment zone. Next slide, Dave. Just a few basics on the pilot. So as I mentioned, it is on demand. So a rider requests a ride, and then they're connected to a driver. They get information on that driver and the vehicle, and an estimated pickup time. Usually the pickup times are between 10 and 15 minutes. If it's a sort of a non-peak time, it's been less than that, although we have seen significantly longer times when we have some supply restraints. It's micro transit, so there's shared rides. There may be solo rides at times, but we've seen a lot more shared rides, especially as demand has increased. Typically, it's provided by a smaller vehicle, an SUV or a minivan. We do have one wheelchair accessible minivan that's leased. The rest of the vehicles are provided by the drivers themselves. The service hours currently are weekdays from 4:30 in the morning to 11:30 at night. We did start initially in the pilot having hours from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m., but quickly expanded those hours to cover some additional shifts that employers were demanding in the area. Fares are set up right now as free from zone 1, which is closest to the employment zone, and $1.50 per one-way trip from zone 2, which is a little farther away from the employment zone. And I'll show a map on a subsequent slide. And as a research pilot, there were several surveys that were sent out to riders as well as employers to get feedback and input. That is helping us to plan for FlexRide 2.0. The next slide. Just a quick note on support. The support really has been overwhelming from all sides. The City of Milwaukee and Milwaukee County have been very supportive. We had a launch event where both the mayor and county executive spoke in support of the pilot project. On the other side of the county line in Waukesha County, we also had representation from Waukesha County. We know that there's a lot of support for helping their employers fill job openings. And so that launch event was successful. Several other events after this, we had a lot of support for, and there's been a fair amount of media attention around the pilot as a lot of people see this as a way to fill a gap in the transportation system. I mentioned a map just to show you where rides are currently being provided. I'll give you a little background on this. So the Menomonee Falls and Butler area is essentially drawn, that employment zone is essentially drawn to try to capture the employment centers in those two communities and a little bit of the adjacent communities where employment is sort of contiguous with those communities. And then zones 1 and 2, the idea with the free fare for zone 1 is that it is closer to the employment center, employment zone. And so there are shorter trips, less costly trips. And then zone 2 at $1.50 a ride, those really cover a lot of the north and northwest side neighborhoods where a lot of residents demand a service like this. And so there's a little bit of a higher cost. I think the fares are something that we'll be looking at for FlexRide 2.0, a different fare model. These were really chosen as sort of a test question to see if people are willing to get closer to the employment center by bus or other means not have to pay a fare, or if they're willing to pay a fare, but maybe have a ride that's closer to home. Next slide. One key question that we've asked as part of this RFP and really through the pilot was what the best model is, the service delivery model. So we initially started with 5 pickup points on the left map there, and 2 employment zones. About 2 months into the pilot, we weren't seeing a lot of ridership. It was obviously a new service, and so there were a number of aspects that made it made lower ridership obvious, expected. But we did switch to a zone-based model for the pickup zones, and then also combine the employment zone later in the pilot. So we have the zone system that we see now. I think one of the things that we're looking at for FlexRide 2.0 is cost effectiveness, and whether this service delivery model is the most cost effective when you balance that with also the user friendliness. And so that's something that we're exploring as part of this RFP process. Next slide. Just a quick note on accessibility. So we are trying to make the service accessible to all people, regardless of their situation. So we do have a wheelchair accessible vehicle in the fleet. That is a leased vehicle. We also have a phone number call-in option for those that can't use the smartphone app. They don't have access to a smartphone. And as well, trying to accommodate individuals that don't have a debit or credit card that they can attach to their account and need to pay with cash. And so right now we have a voucher system where someone pays cash for a voucher that has a code on it. They enter that code into their account, and that gives them a number of ride credits associated with that code. That is another thing that that's maybe not the most efficient way for folks to be able to pay with cash. Unfortunately, right now, the service is considered a transportation network company provided service, and so not a public transit service by state law. And so we're not actually allowed to accept cash payment on board, but that is something that we are hoping to address as part of FlexRide 2.0. Just a little bit of a sense of what the ridership demand has been. We have seen significant increases in demand and ridership throughout the pilot. And in fact, October is not shown, but in the first couple of weeks in October, we've seen even more of an increase. I think we're over 900 rides already in October. Next slide. Cost effectiveness is something that is key and something we've been tracking closely. As you can see, as ridership has increased, the cost per ride has obviously gone down. And in October, with the increased demand, we have seen a lower number, around $50. And the goal is always to improve upon that as much as possible. Next. So to give you a sense of who the riders are who's applied to the service, the majority are unemployed, female, low income households, which is defined as less than $1,500 a month. Over 80% are African American, which, if you recall the racial equity slide that Dave covered, there's a heavy concentration of African Americans in the north and northwest side. And then almost 90% don't have access to a vehicle, which makes sense. That's why they're applying to use this service. And then about 1 in 5 are unbanked and need to pay with cash, so they're using the voucher system. Next. All right, just a few notes on the next steps so that we're sort of all on the same page, and then I'll hand it over to Dave. We are working on completing the pilot research and evaluating the pilot with UWM. The current service will continue in its current form through March 31st. So we'll continue to serve those zones that we have, that we showed in a previous slide. And then the FlexRide 2.0 expansion, which is the subject of this RFP, is set to launch on April 1st of next year. As you all know from the previous slides, Mobilize is leading this and is also leading the current RFP for the FlexRide 2.0 vendor. One thing on the next slide that Dave will go into more detail on is a workforce innovation grant to the state of Wisconsin that was obtained. That is allowing us to fund the service through at least 2024. And we do have several additional funding sources that we're also pursuing. Dave, I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, sorry about that, everybody. As Eric mentioned, we were able to secure a significant ARPA grant through the state of Wisconsin. This is the announcement last June here with our Governor Tony Evers, several members of his administration, and like I said, this is all federal funding from ARPA, but just in the spirit of transparency here about what the dollar amounts are allocated towards. FlexRide, of course, is the largest chunk here. That's the core service of FlexRide Milwaukee, which we're looking to fund here through this RFP. But that's not all that there is, the workforce innovation grant. We are working with the subrecipient here in Milwaukee called Milwaukee Careers Cooperative, which is a nonprofit that's been working for years on running long distance shuttles from the city to very distant job centers and even more rural parts of southeastern Wisconsin. So it's really doesn't overlap with the FlexRide service zone. Those are the places that are very far out. We're talking, manufacturing plants and farm fields and such, a good 30, 40 miles from the city. We're directing 120,000 in TNC vouchers that will be administered through our partners here, several of the business groups that represent businesses that are part of the MCTS footprint, but do encounter transportation challenges related to bus routes not running late enough and other gaps in the transit service. This 200,000 here directly relates with the RFP. This is a separate tranche here of dollars from the 2.8 million, but that is specifically directed towards technical assistance and equity gap financing for transportation companies here from underrepresented communities, provided by our subrecipient and our partner in this, the Ethnic and Diverse Business Coalition of Wisconsin. I'll get into a little bit about our requirements for the RFP and the 10% requirement for MBE participants, but I want to be very clear that the EDBC has been working with us for several years on this project. We do have a pipeline that they've engaged with of local MBE providers that we would encourage or require at least 10% to be subrecipients in the fleet management portion of the contract. And then, of course, more would be encouraged. We have community liaisons that will be performing community outreach through Employ Milwaukee. That's our workforce development board here in Milwaukee County. And a relatively small amount for business outreach out in the collar counties, the Waukesha, Zaki, and Washington counties, often abbreviated as the WOW counties, if you ever see that in the media. Okay, I'm going to advance to the next slide here. So our goals for FlexRide 2.0, and a lot of this is in the RFP, but as we know, it's a balancing act between what's best for our Flex riders and what we can, afford under the terms of this grant and additional dollars that we're seeking. We do have other requests into governmental units here in our area. We'll be finding out in the next few weeks, few months here about those, and potentially other revenue streams. But the FlexRide 2.0 is that balance of what's best for the rider, and then what the cost effectiveness and sustainability is. But our top goal in terms of Flex riders: quick, reliable, safe, welcoming, and cost effective micro transit. So whether that be an instantaneous on demand, or whether that be a reservation type of model, or a hybrid, is to be determined. But we heard directly from our Flex riders and bus riders through the development of this pilot, which was funded by a science grant. So we were able to do some significant research. And we found that, I guess not surprisingly, our transit riders want a quick, reliable, safe, welcoming, and cost effective. And we're going to try to honor that as much as we possibly can here. We want to provide a service to businesses that helps participating employers attract a wider labor pool, attract workers, and address employee turnover. The political support that we've been able to get for this program really rests on these two things. It's good for racial equity and it's good for economic development in our region. And we're excited to have a program that shows that those two things, racial equity and economic development, are not in conflict with each other. They really are two sides of the same coin. So we have businesses that are, in a very tight labor market in our region and a labor shortage, are highly motivated to participate in programs like this. So we, of course, want to build a cost-effective, efficient service, demonstrates return on investment to our businesses. I mean, people that pay in, of course, our FlexRiders, our policymakers. And, that really gets to the slide that Eric pointed at earlier about the cost per ride. Among, many of our policymakers that are interested in this program, that's their main metric. It's a key metric. And of course, that's going to be one of ours as well. We want to be responsive to the needs of riders and businesses in designing a system that can be flexible and make necessary adjustments. We've seen that in FlexRide 1.0, which Eric pointed to, where we pivoted from the stop-based model to a zone model relatively quickly. So we're looking for that kind of flexibility, and that really is based on good communication and just flexibility in delivering the service. And here's a unique a twist on this. We are looking to meet the unique transportation needs of working parents through our partnership with Employ Milwaukee, which is receiving funds through the grant to do community outreach and have community liaisons. We're looking to position high quality childcare centers in Milwaukee as quote unquote workforce mobility hubs. And we're using the quotes very deliberately because we don't want to give the impression that we're going to have daycare centers be bus depots or actual physical hubs. It's really more being deliberate about providing FlexRide benefits to working parents. If possible, having it be as convenient and safe of a ride as we can possibly afford to make it, or logistically afford to make it for a working parent. Because we recognize that a trip to work for a good chunk of the working public is not just a trip to work, it's a trip to daycare, trip to dropping your kid off, and then a trip to work, kind of like I did this morning, dropping my kid off at school before coming to the office. So our objectives here is, we want to expand our current service area. Menominee Falls will remain a service area. We've seen a lot of demand in that area. But we want to move into other areas, specifically here. You're getting a crash course in suburban Milwaukee geography here, but Germantown, New Berlin, Brookfield, Mequon, Franklin, Oak Creek, you can see here on the map. Those are areas with high concentrations of good paying jobs. We want to pursue the most cost-effective method, whether that be zones or pickup points. We will subcontract with local transportation companies from underrepresented communities. And like I said, positioning with the childcare centers as workforce mobility hubs. So as we look to the future of this RFP and as we transition from Stewart Pack to Mobilize as overseeing our this work, I'll say that we're governed by a 17-member board of directors made up of civic and business leaders in our area, Chamber of Commerce, various business groups, community groups, some of our larger companies, our larger corporations in the Milwaukee area. But we will also have an advisory board that is directly overseeing FlexRide 2.0, made up of participating businesses in the program, communities where our riders come from, and workforce development groups. So in conversations with our board and in learning from FlexRide 1.0, we have what I kind of think of as guideposts. These are the things that we know we want the service to look like. So we want it to remain fundamentally a workforce solution for people traveling from the city to the suburbs. That doesn't preclude other urban centers in our region, including Racine. And as you saw on the map, and those of you familiar with our region, we have a smattering of other urban centers around the region. Of course, Milwaukee is the largest, but there could potentially be demand within logistical reach of perhaps the city of Racine as a pickup spot. But fundamentally, we want it to be a city to suburb solution. We want to maintain our employment zone in Menominee Falls. We know that we want to have at least one, what we're calling an expansion zone here in the southern Milwaukee suburbs of Oak Creek and Franklin. One of our key partners in this effort of planning FlexRide has been the city of Franklin, the municipality representing, one of those suburbs, of course, and the Franklin Business Park Consortium, the largest concentration of blue collar manufacturing and warehouse jobs in Milwaukee County, but very, very far on the southern end of Milwaukee County, and difficult to reach from transit. So they've been engaged in this work, and we know that there's a demand there and a desire among the businesses to participate. One of our guideposts, of course, will engage with local transportation companies from underrepresented communities in Wisconsin as subcontractors. The reason for this really gets back to the original slide here about racial equity. We understand that done right, a workforce development solution like this can be not just helping people get to jobs, but also can be an opportunity for business development among the communities that we're serving here with FlexRide. We also believe that local drivers, locally owned vans might not be possible to have that be 100%, but it's there's a local knowledge base there, and just kind of an understanding of the landscape in our community that's very important that comes from that. And we know that we'll position our early childhood center as workforce mobility hubs, and in partnership with these early childhood centers, offer a suite of benefits to working families, whether that be reduced fares, whether that be a safe, a more pleasant place to wait for a FlexRide, especially in the middle of January, and so forth. So our planning questions, these are the known unknowns. These are the things that we want you as our responders to help us figure out. So we want to, we might adjust the current model of pickup zones to pickup locations, or it could be a hybrid, depending on the cost effectiveness of either approach. We're looking for, guidance and solutions on how we collect employer contributions, perhaps through a business-friendly membership model, maybe like Uber for Business kind of model, so that our businesses would effectively subsidize fares for their employees, and that could be a way to collect employee contributions to help the service be sustainable. We'll very carefully consider the employment status of the drivers. Currently, the drivers are independent contractors. We're looking for which is the best fit for the service, and really what's best for the balancing act of cost effectiveness and the best service for our flex riders, either independent contractors or employees of the contractor or subcontractor. We might seek greater flexibility in that service delivery model and zone. So, right now, as Eric said, it is an on-demand model. You call for it like an Uber. Perhaps there could be a space for that combined with more of a reservation kind of model. And I want to be clear here about the total ridership and market size. It's as yet undefined. I mean, we work with Sewer Pack. We know the demographics, so we have general parameters here. But, we want you to be able to tell us, given what we have here in terms of resources and the market, how can we serve, make the biggest dent in, helping people overcome the transportation barrier in terms of the size of potential ridership pool. So a lot of this is in the RFP, but we have requirements here for the response to the RFP. So we want our contractor to be responsible for the zone management, and that's ultimately managing the pickup and employment zones, providing the flexibility and responsiveness that we're seeking, and that really is regular communication, of course, remaining flexible about our zones and our pickup spots, and really the successful responder will have a very clear plan for what the zones would look like, at least out of the box, and then how we can adjust those moving forward. Fleet management and operations. I also say too that, and it says there in the RFP that we're looking for a turnkey. None of the vans will be owned by Mobilize or drivers owned by Mobilize. So it'll be a turnkey solution, either one responder or a team of responders. But the fleet management and operations, the supply and maintain all the necessary vehicle software, hire the drivers, and then project management. Key function here. We definitely would have a preference for project manager locally based, at least in the Milwaukee area or somewhat near. So we have regular communication and a firsthand understanding of the landscape here in our area, comprehensive work plan, service and deployment plan, performance monitoring and reporting. Okay, and then real quickly, I'm going to run through our timeline here. So we're looking to execute on the contract in January of 23. We'll develop the work plan in February, March of 23. Service launch April 1st, 2023. And our service term then runs through at least December 31st, 2024. And like I said, we are seeking additional dollars here that might extend that, and there could be a possibility with our WIG grant to extend that through those dollars into 2025. But for the purposes of RFP, we'll have it at 12/31/24 as the end of this current service term. So I'll toss it back to Eric here for a little more detail on the RFP.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. All right, I know we're running a bit over time here, so I'm going to move pretty quickly through these slides. But obviously, the first two key dates. The RFP was issued 2 weeks ago, and we are currently doing the pre-proposal conference. I think Chris might have mentioned in the chat that we'll share slides and a recording of this, as well as a list of attendees, I think in a couple of days. A week from today, we're asking for any questions, clarifications, any requests for modifications to the RFP to be submitted to us. And then if we need to issue an addendum, we will do that by November 4th. And then 2 weeks after that are when we are asking for proposals to be submitted by 5 o'clock on Central Time. Next slide. A bit on the proposal content. So I think we're pretty detailed in the RFP as far as what we're looking for. We are requesting separate packages. So one technical proposal and one price proposal to be submitted electronically in PDF form. For the technical proposal, I would direct you to section 3.1 of the RFP for the items that are to be included in that proposal. So obviously the table of contents and a cover letter are required. Statement of project understanding demonstrating that you understand the goals and the sort of the existing conditions within which the project is being implemented. Number 4, the project approach, I think is probably the meatiest part of the proposal, where you're talking about the service model that would be used, zone operations, pickup points, hybrid of the two, how you would anticipate ridership and deal with that, as well as this is where you would talk about the Wisconsin-based MVE transportation companies and how much of the contract would be with those companies. The service area and operating hours would also be included in here. We're asking for a map as well as the hours, and I think we do specify what hours we're looking for. The description of the fleet, including how many vehicles and the type of the vehicle, also whether they would be owned or leased, and then want to emphasize that we would like the vehicles to be branded with FlexRide branding. Description of the technology platform and hardware, making sure that we understand how the on-demand component would be delivered, as well as whether there's reservations and how that works, and the fare collection system. And a note on the fare collection, the Milwaukee County Transit System is introducing a new fare collection system called UMO, which is done through Cubic. And so I think we're looking for potential integration of that during the course of the contract. Also, as part of number 4, the operators. So whether the operators would be employees of a contractor or subcontractor, or if they would be independent contractors, which is the current model we're using. And then a performance evaluation plan, looking for how the service would be assessed, access to the data, and whether we'd have a real-time dashboard, and then also what specific performance metrics would be provided. Accessibility, And I mentioned on a previous slide, we're looking to make sure we accommodate limited mobility residents, those that are unbanked, as well as those that do not have a smartphone. And then lastly, as part of number 4, the project approach, looking at how training and support is provided, both to drivers and mobilize, and making sure that we have good support on the back end. Number 5, the program plan. This is really where you address the approach to implementing the zones, pickup and employment zones, or however the service delivery model is that you propose, however that works. And also include in this the review, analysis, delivery of the service in conjunction with the scope of services, which is section 2 of the RFP. Number 6, the project timeline. So I think we've laid out pretty clearly what the timeline is that we're working under for the RFP, but providing a schedule for performing the different tasks that are in the scope of services is part of that. And then number 7, demonstrating that your proposal has the relevant experience, performance, key team members behind it, providing references and summary of some of the projects that you've done in the past that would be relevant to our project. And then lastly, other information. So this is where you would include anything else that you think is relevant to the proposal. And I would note, in addition on this, the technical proposal, if there are suggested approaches to developing financial partnerships to help fund the service. And in particular, I think we're talking about employer contributions and how that could be done, different models for that, different ideas for that. We would greatly appreciate anything like that and included in that technical proposal. And then the other piece, you can go to the next slide, Dave. Section 3.2 introduces the price proposal, that package. So Exhibit A would be something we would be looking for you to fill out that provides the pricing. And we've got sort of broken up into 3 different zones that we've described. And I think we're on the map on a previous slide. And so we're looking for information on the cost per service hour, the cost per passenger, and then sort of the total lump sum cost. And then including a variety of different ridership expectations in the first 2 years of the service, the FlexRide 2.0 service. So whether we expect high ridership, medium ridership, low ridership, and we provided some ranges there to try to gauge how that might affect the price proposal as well. So submitting that Exhibit A is an important part, and that would be evaluated separate from the technical proposal. And then the evaluation criteria. So this is sorry, apologies. The evaluation of the technical proposals and price proposals would obviously be done separately, as we mentioned. There is, for the technical proposals, a 100-point system, and there will be a subcommittee, evaluation subcommittee, that is assigned to evaluate all of these, and then the scoring would be calculated, and then the price proposals would be evaluated separately, and then sort of looking at both the technical proposal and the price proposal, determining what would be the best proposal that would be pursued for a contract. I would reference the evaluation criteria in a table on the top, or in a table on page 10. So we're looking for 10 points for project understanding, that you understand the vision, the goals, objectives for FlexRide that we described previously. Importantly, understanding or providing the qualifications and experience that you would bring to the table. And then that's 20 points, 30 points for the project approach and program plan. So I mentioned that's sort of the meatiest part of the technical proposal. 10 points, really this is trying to encourage subcontracting with some of the Wisconsin-based MBEs that we've identified, and working with the Ethnic and Diverse Business Coalition to identify those and connect those to the main contractors. 10 points for data collection and reporting, 10 points for performance monitoring, and then lastly, a category for program innovation and sustainability. So obviously we've laid out what our goals are, but we want to leave some opportunities for innovation in your proposals. And so this is a category to sort of allow for that and encourage that. And then I think the sustainability is important. So we want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up not just for the next 2 years, but also a sustainable service after those 2 years. I think that concludes our presentations. I'm going to turn it over to Chris for any questions that we've received.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Dave. I see there are 3 questions in the chat, so we'll go through those in order. And if you have any others, feel free to put them in the chat, or we'll have a moment at the end where folks who want to ask questions verbally can go ahead and do that. And as a reminder, we'll post notes from this call as well as the presentation slides on the project website. And we are recording, and we may post the recording on the website as well if we feel that would be beneficial. So the first question is from Stephen. Program expansion and planning is a big piece of this project. I'm looking to clarify whether service model proposals, including vehicles, pickup zones, hours of operation, are expected as part of the submission or as part of the contracted working relationship.
Yeah, I think we're looking for a turnkey solution. So a response that reflects a turnkey solution would be the response that we're looking for, and that would include everything there that Eric had pointed out about the requirements. Now that being said, it could be a team of responders.
And I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, we are looking for that information as part of the proposal. And obviously we would work on finer points and details as part of the contract. So I think we understand there's a number of different ways to deliver what we're looking for. And so there will be clarification that we can make after the proposals are received, but we are looking for that information as part of the proposal.
Thank you.
All right, next up, also from Stephen, what is the fleet composition of FlexRide 1.0?
Sure, I can handle that. So right now we have, I think we mentioned previously, the drivers are independent contractors, and we have one vehicle that is leased. It's a minivan that is wheelchair accessible, has a lift in the back. And then we have I think we have about 20 to 25 drivers who bring their own vehicles to the service. And those vehicles, I think, range in, there are some passenger vehicles, maybe with capacity for 4 additional riders, besides the driver. And the largest vehicles we have are minivans.
Thanks. So just to clarify, it's what the individual contractors are bringing, similar to TNCs.
Yes.
Perfect.
Similar.
Thank you.
Yep. Currently, but under FlexRide 2.0, that could be different.
Thanks for the clarification.
Absolutely.
All right, another question here from Stephen. Will the ultimate price during operations be evaluated on a monthly basis by extrapolating monthly ridership into the proposed annual bucket? Or by what mechanism will ongoing price be determined?
You want to handle that one, Eric?
Yeah, I understand what you're looking for there. Maybe, can we unmute Stephen? Maybe you can elaborate on that?
Yeah, for sure. When I look at the pricing proposal, there are different ridership buckets and different price mechanisms. Now, as we move forward through the contract on a monthly basis, how will the different mechanism and ridership bucket be determined, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe this is a point to clarify on the pricing sheet. I think what we're looking for as far as the proposal is just trying to put the pricing into these buckets so that we have a sense of how it changes with ridership. And I think when we first launched the service, the FlexRide 2.0 service on April 1st, we would probably go in expecting to be on the lower end of that and then ramp up as we go forward. I guess the mechanism for how we would sort of utilize those buckets, if we utilize them at all, for FlexRide 2.0 is still to be determined. But that's something maybe we could talk about and provide a more detailed answer after this conference.
Okay, so just to clarify, in terms of monthly invoicing for the contract, The specific mechanism and ridership bucket is yet to be determined. This is simply for a ballpark understanding on your side of the cost.
I think that's our expectation. Yes, we can maybe again kind of clarify that maybe if we issue an addendum or a list of responses to questions like this, we can clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, there are no other questions in the chat. And if anybody has any questions they would like to ask verbally, please feel free to take yourself off of mute.
Hi, this is Maxwell Myers from the routing company. Off of one of the earlier answer about the independent contractors and the 20 to 25 vehicles, how many vehicles, I mean, I'm sure it fluctuates during the day, but at, I guess like maximum capacity, or I guess during peak hours, how many vehicles typically operate at once? Is it like maybe 5 vehicles during like the morning or evening rush hours, or 10, or kind of a range?
Yeah, great question. Off mute, okay. I think at maximum, we usually have, in our heaviest peak times, we might have up to 5 or 6 vehicles on the road. And then during our sort of low peak times, it's maybe more like 2 vehicles on the road. We try not to get below that, but we do have, I think maybe one thing we didn't emphasize enough early on, but we do have a fairly peaky system, and it's not the traditional peaks that you would expect. So a lot of the service where we ramp up service is early morning hours, closest to that 4:30 start time, early afternoon, maybe around noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and then more like late evening in the 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock hour. And I think that that amount of service that we have to provide is really trying to cater to the different shifts and the needs of the employers that we're serving. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a pretty simple question. There's some boilerplate language in the RFP around performance bond requirements. Can you clarify if there are any performance bond requirements for this project?
Yeah, I think that's another one we should probably clarify, maybe as part of the addendum. I think the performance bond requirements, this is part of the federal clauses, section 5 of the RFP. And maybe just, I think this is an important one to verbalize. So the federal clauses, which make up over half the RFP, are really, if we expect to obtain federal transit authority or transit administration funding, which is a possibility, but we haven't obtained any yet for this service. We want to make sure that any bidders are aware of the federal clauses that would need to come into play. So we don't have any current bond requirements as part of the RFP yet, but we want to make sure that that's put out there and it's a possibility. So I think for the federal clauses, what we'd be looking for proposers to do is just demonstrate that you understand that that's a possibility. And we're actually not requesting that you sign all of the forms that are included in those federal clauses, but just recognize that those could be part of a contract if we obtain federal funding.
Thanks.
Does that help, Stephen?
Yeah, that's very clear.
Okay.
Paul, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. Thanks, Paul with American United Transportation Group. I appreciate the section mentioned kind of around the Wisconsin supplier diversity program. You mentioned Wisconsin-based MBEs. If an organization was subprime or part of a partnership, would there be any consideration if they weren't a recognized diversity ownership group, but if you took a pool of occupants or employees within the organization, I think it's important that obviously talking with a lot of local and state leaders, just the provider network that has shrunk from many different aspects. I think it's great that it was recognized here, and important that Wisconsin-based businesses are involved and bidding on projects like this. Any expansion on thought on that, or would something be considered even if they weren't exactly owned within some of the diversity titles that are spelled out, but but was Wisconsin based and could show a diverse employment group?
Yeah, I think, ideally our subs would be certified as MBEs. We do recognize that there's a lot of variation, within the actual universe of transportation companies locally based. That's one that we can, I offer a bit more clarification on in an addendum. I mean, we do, would prefer MBEs, but we might be open to another type of way of considering, the transportation company and, how they're composed. But that's something that we can offer some clarification on.
Would you want to see something formal submitted to your group, or is that something you would then just consider, speak internally, and add as an addendum based on this request?
Yeah, we'll talk internally with our partners at EDBC and add that in the addendum. Yep, thanks.
Thank you. That's all for now.
Great, thanks.
All right, we got about a minute left. If anyone has any final questions.
One more question. Max Myers from the routing company. I think one of you had mentioned earlier in the presentation that with the, I think it was the Ethnic Diverse Business Coalition that you said you've worked with over the last few years. Is there anyone specifically that we might be able to contact out? Because I think you said there might be a pipeline. So just if you maybe point us in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So our contact there is Marjorie Ruckers, Executive Director of the EDBC. And we can provide her contact information. She's well aware of the RFP process and prepared to, speak in depth about, the pool here of local companies. And, in EDBC, just to be clear, I mean, they provide technical assistance. They have relationships with a lot of the community development financial institutions here to help them scale up. So, there's been a lot of work and vetting thus far, but we can definitely get you Marjorie's contact.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Could her contact be shared with the group? I don't know if there was a if there would be a follow-up email. I know it was mentioned in the chat as far as if the meeting itself would be put online. Would it at least be shared with the group that's participating here today?
Absolutely, yep.
Great. Well, that brings us to 11 o'clock Central Time. We appreciate everybody's participation in the call, and we will be sharing the slides for today's presentation, as well as some additional notes and a list of attendees. We'll make sure to get that contact information for the EDBC out to the group. Anything else, Dave or Eric, before we wrap up?
I think maybe we failed to mention it, but any other questions after the RFP or after this conference, please direct them to the email address listed in the RFP, which I believe is procurement@mobilizewi.org.
By 5 p.m. Central Time next Wednesday.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.